Okay, well, I guess what I'm going to do is go ahead and get started. My name is Adrienne, and I am really excited to present to you and welcome you to our session in the Do-Jang. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. When emerging tech meets an age-old martial art. We have an amazing presentation for you, and I'm excited to introduce Mansi Kadare, who will speak to us on how she leveraged artificial intelligence to help others in the martial arts. She is a dynamic woman of 17 years from Toronto, Canada, who was able to combine her two passions, artificial intelligence and Taekwondo. Her talk really is going to embody our theme of elevating joy. And without further ado, well, before I hand it over, just a few housekeeping items. Please know that all questions are welcome, but we will answer them at the end. Okay, below in your Zoom, there is a little Q&A. My last session, didn't know how to find it, but it looks like two bubbles next to each other and next to the participants. So if you can post your questions there so we can keep track, that would be great. All righty, guys, without further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Mansi.
Thank you so much, Adrienne, for the introduction. So now that you know a little bit about me, I want to tell you a story. Growing up, I've always been an active kid. From gymnastics to track to basketball to soccer, it's always been something. A few years ago, 4 to be exact, I took up Taekwondo. And a year later, I participated in a tournament arranged by the International Taekwondo Federation and ended up winning a belt in the special techniques category. So for those of you that are not aware, Taekwondo tournaments usually have 3 parts to them. There's sparring, which is like fighting, patterns, and special techniques, like flying kicks or jumping kicks. It's basically just who can jump and kick the highest. And I consider special techniques to be my strong point of the 3, because let me tell you, I cannot spar even if my life depended on it. Anyways, as it turns out, my younger brother, he's 10, he does Taekwondo too. And as embarrassing as it is, he's a higher belt than me. So most of the time he's helping me with stuff, while also simultaneously bragging about the fact that he's a higher belt. But I'm always assigned the task to help my brother with his sidekicks. So for reference, this is what a sidekick looks like. When you do a sidekick, it's really important that you bring your knee in before you kick and right after to make sure no one grabs you by the foot, because that would be pretty terrible. And here, you see that the heel is above the toes, or at least on the same level. And that's because when you're doing a sidekick, you want to kick with the heel of your foot, not the ball, and definitely not your toes. So these practice sessions with my brother, they start out fine. I nicely point out the mistakes he's making, and he corrects them too. Eventually, though, my older sister power runs out, and out of nowhere, I'm the one getting kicked instead of the bag. Long story short, it always somehow ends up with the 2 of us sitting in our rooms, grounded, being asked to reflect on our actions. If you have younger siblings, you can probably relate. As I was reflecting one day, I decided I'd had enough. And with that, I sought out to build something that could help my brother with his sidekicks for me. And I ended up making this. So this trainer is primarily designed to help with your sidekicks. The AI Taekwondo trainer will count the number of sidekicks you do while also making sure you're doing them right. Tiny details like this are really easy to forget when you're practicing your kicks. Take it from me. So to help with that, this trainer will keep track of all of that stuff. And it does this by taking something called the maximum and the minimum angle. See, the maximum angle is the highest you can kick. To find it, users will have to do a sidekick in front of the trainer 10 times, and the model will automatically take the highest angle. Now, let's say you're doing these 10 kicks and they aren't your greatest. You know you can kick higher, but today's just not your day. Well, that's all good because the trainer will continually adjust to the maximum angle. So let's say you're practicing your kicks and they get higher. Well, congratulations, because that's what we want. So let's say before your highest angle was 95 degrees, and now after practicing, it's 110 degrees. Well, now 110 is your new maximum angle. It's now the highest you can kick. And the minimum angle is really easy to find because it's just the angle at which one's legs are at when they're resting. Since this trainer is personalized, this process is crucial. Everyone will have different abilities, different maximum and minimum values. And this also means that once these angles are inputted, you're good to go, and the trainer can now be used. So let me explain the different parts of the trainer you see here. On the left, you have this counter with this big number 12 written on it. And this counts the number of side kicks you do. Now, the beauty of this trainer is that it will only count the side kicks that go above the maximum angle or kick right at it. So for example, let's say that your maximum angle is 105 degrees. Only if my side kick is 105 degrees or higher will it actually be counted by the trainer. And this was a feature I had to make sure I added in, especially for my brother, who loves doing half kicks. And then on the right, you see this bar. See, this bar shows you how close you are to reaching your maximum angle. So in this case, 341 is my maximum angle. And because I'm already at that angle, the bar is at 100%. And then finally, you see this angle in yellow and blue, and with the big 341 written on it. And this angle is the angle at which my legs are at all times. Now, before I actually get into how the trainer works, as a refresher, or for those who may not be aware, let me explain what AI is. So to understand, I want you to think back to when you first learned how to ride a bike. Recall that feeling of being overwhelmed by all the things you needed to keep in mind in order to stay upright and in control. There were rules for when, how, what speed to pedal at, what to do with your many body parts in order to maintain balance, observing your surroundings, what types of roads you were on, its contours, was it wet, sandy, gravelly, was it cloudy outside, sunny, light, dark, windy, calm? What was the likelihood of a car coming and hitting you? What about a pedestrian? There was so much that went into just achieving that simple act of staying upright long enough to allow for the gyroscopic effect of your wheels to keep you from falling. And you may be thinking, you weren't really aware of all of this stuff, right? Well, that's because your brain does a wonderful job of observing much more than you're consciously aware of. It knows that certain repetitive behaviors in a specific context are empirically correct. They achieve the goal of staying upright. So you don't have to keep track of every behavior and contextual input. Because if you did, you'd never be able to respond to that car in time. And that's all AI really is. It's just a really good student that learns over time how behaviors and contextual inputs result in progress towards a goal. So in your case, with the bike, you did that by falling down and scraping your knees over and over. And in the case of AI, that's done by running millions upon millions of simulations. Okay, so I knew I wanted to build an AI Taekwondo trainer. There was one problem though. I didn't know how. But one day, during lockdown, I went downstairs and dusted off my old Xbox. It had a workout DVD that guided you through different exercises and tracked your movements. So as an example, let's take sit-ups. If you didn't bring yourself all the way up, or your posture was off, let's say your knees were straight instead of bent, well, the computer wouldn't count that sit-up. Instead, it would tell you what you did wrong. And that's when inspiration struck. See, the Xbox DVD was built based on something called 3D human pose estimation. It's a computer vision technique that predicts and tracks a person's location or object and analyzes the human posture. It can also be defined as a search for a specific pose in space of all articulated poses. And this is done by looking at a combination of the pose and the orientation of a given person or object. We can identify, locate, and track the number of key points on a given object or person through pose estimation. So for humans, these key points represent major joints like your shoulder, elbow, knees, etc. Pose estimation allows for a higher level reasoning in the context of human-computer interaction and activity recognition. And it's also one of the basic building blocks for markerless motion capture, also known as mocap, technology. But beyond just this Taekwondo trainer, pose estimation can be used for a whole slew of things, ranging from physiotherapy to gaming. Now there's 3 different types of human pose estimation. So first off, you've got the skeleton-based model. And this model only analyzes joints. So again, for example, your knees, shoulders, elbows, etc. And as the name implies, it looks at the skeletal structure of the human body. Second, you've got the contour-based model. And this one looks at the person's silhouette. It takes into account things like the width of your arms, torso, legs, just to name a few. And finally, you've got the volume-based model. Now this one's my favorite because I think it's the coolest, but it's also a little bit more advanced. It looks at the muscular structure of a person. However, it's not as easily accessible because it can only be created through 3D body scans. Now, my Taekwondo trainer uses a skeleton-based model approach. The computer creates confidence maps that look at the probability distribution over an image and analyzes it pixel by pixel. I first made a pose estimation algorithm to later use in my Taekwondo trainer, and it looks something like this. So here you can see the key points on major joints, like the shoulder, elbow, you can see the smile, eyes, hips, things like that. So using this as the basis of my Taekwondo trainer, I then messed around with the code a little bit and trained my model. Now, there aren't many sidekick data sets that I could use to train my model with. In fact, there are none. Even Kaggle couldn't help me this time. So I had to make my own. I collected hundreds of pictures of my friends, fellow Taekwondo athletes, and myself all doing sidekicks and used that to train my model. Now, when you're making your own data set, it's a whole job of its own. It's also really important that your model doesn't develop any type of bias. So for instance, measurement bias or representation bias. And this would be because a certain group of people are underrepresented in the training data set. And of course, to mitigate that, you need thousands upon thousands of videos, images, and a whole bunch of things of different people doing sidekicks. So making the data set on its own took about 4 months. And this entire project was an ongoing process that took about 10 months to complete. The process involved speaking to lots and lots of experts in the field, ideating, problem solving, a lot of that, and of course, actually building. Throughout the course of this project, there were so many hurdles. The first one, and undoubtedly the biggest one, was that I didn't know how to code. Self-teaching myself Python and OpenCV along the way made the end result even more rewarding. During the times of the pandemic, not only did this project keep me busy, but it also gave me something to look forward to every morning when I woke up. Currently, I'm working on turning this into an app and deploying it onto the App Store. COVID-19 has made the innovation gap in this sport even more prominent, and I believe with my Taekwondo trainer, I hope I can bridge the gap and give athletes the resource they need to train on their own. So it's been about 3 months since I've let the AI Taekwondo trainer take care of helping my brother with his sidekicks for me. And I wish I could say we got into less arguments and I got grounded less, but what's the point of lying? We always find something to disagree on. Anyway, in the past 3 months, his sidekicks went from here to here, second image on the right. And his technique has improved considerably as well. Apologies for the blurry image, we took this from a video, but it won't be long until I lose the one thing that I have, higher sidekick bragging rights. Thank you.
All righty. Well, Monty, as a sister of a little brother, I can definitely relate. And I want to, and this was a great conversation. I mean, I think we're getting quite a few responses about how wonderful it is that you were able to bring those two passions together. Okay, just a friendly reminder, if you have questions, if you could just post them in the Q&A. Some people did not do that, so that's okay. Thank you for the questions that were given to me directly, and I will go over those. So Monty, we have a question from the audience. Did you do all of the development yourself?
Yeah, so I did do all of the development myself. It took a while and also a lot of videos and going back and forth and asking a lot of questions. But yes, I did develop it myself.
Okay. And then the next question that we had, is there a big market potential for your app or your future app for other martial arts outside of Taekwondo?
Yeah, for sure. So I believe that this Taekwondo trainer, as I mentioned, not only is it applicable to Taekwondo and even just martial arts as a whole, but I also think it could be applied to things outside of, even just sports. So at the moment, it's being applied to things like basketball and baseball, golf. So those are just the sports that it's being applied to. But aside from that, it can also be used in physiotherapy, gaming, and there's just a whole range of potential for this technology for sure.
Okay, great. Then we have another private question. How long and how did you learn Python?
So for Python, obviously it's still an ongoing process, and I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in any way, but enough to build this, it took about 10 months. And again, that was also an ongoing process, and I'm still learning. So I'd say about 10 months.
Okay. And the last question I have, is your brother continue to improve upon his kicks?
Yes, yes, he is. He is improving day by day.
Okay. All righty. Just going to ask, do we have any more questions for Munzi? All right. How can they reach you, Munzi, if they want to follow your progress?
Yeah, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's all my name, Monsti Katare, and you can find me there.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions from the audience? All right, looks like it's quieted down a bit. And again, thank you, Munzi, for everything. This was a great presentation. And just a reminder for our audience as they go to the next one, if you're part of the technical track, our next presentation from Neelam Batra, Uncover the Unconscious Bias Using AI and ML, which is artificial intelligence and machine language, has been pre-recorded. So more excitement in this technical space for those of you who are interested.